Hello?
Hello? Yeah, very honored to be on your show.
Thanks. What have you got for us?
So I'm gonna discuss the empty tomb. See if you can answer to the theories that you can provide that can account for this fact. So,
can we even say that it's a fact?
Right. Well, we'll start with the evidence for it. So first off, we'll start off with the evidence for the burial, which is that just for instance, like Mark 15:42 to 16:8, one which was the early Passion narrative, which actually happened to be early. 1 Corinthians 15:3 to 7:8, which is also accepted by most scholars to be early, and by Josephus, Jewish 4:317, and this happened to be uninterpolated by Christian sources. And it also agrees that crucified victims received a proper burial, and Jewish law demanded that even foreigners and criminals had to be buried. In Deuteronomy 21:23 and against Appian 2.211, again, also not interpolated. So we also have archaeological evidence for the burial, such as with Yohanan ben Hagalgo, and the burial account of Jesus also meets the criteria of embarrassment, since they had to admit that they could not afford their own tomb to bury Jesus.
So basically you're saying that some people, within a short period of time after the events purportedly occurred,
correct,
talk about a burial that is consistent with burials of the time.
Right.
Sure.
Right. So do we want to start off with the fact that Jesus died by crucifixion, and this builds on the fact that he was crucified, and therefore this results in a burial?
Do we have any contemporary extra biblical evidence for this?
We do, actually. So
no, actually we don't. So Tacitus isn't contemporary, Josephus isn't contemporary, and the Gospels weren't written for decades afterwards. I'm saying outside of the Gospel accounts, outside of what's in the Bible, is there a contemporary account, somebody writing at that time to attest to the facts that the Gospel record attests to?
It came from oral tradition. So Tacitus and Annals 15.
And so the answer is no.
Hold on, may I finish?
Maybe. I'm just saying that if you acknowledge that it came from oral tradition, I don't deny that at all. But when I ask what the contemporary accounts are, and you acknowledge that we don't have the written contemporary accounts, now we're just basically talking about hearsay and a story that has been processed.
Here's perhaps an angle that you can consider. You've come into this, and the main sources of evidence you've given so far are from the Bible, which you've quoted very eloquently.
Okay, so Tacitus in Annals 1544 said that Christ was executed, and this was...
I know, but just 1 second. So you're presenting information and many references from one source, and it's the Bible. Now, the way I look at this is similar to somebody ringing up and saying that they have proof that Spider-Man exists, and their proof that they're offering is that they've read the magazine and they've given several different references to several different pages which reference Spider-Man.
No, I gave extra biblical. So it's
the extra biblical that I'm interested because
but they're not contemporary accounts.
Right.
They are based on the same.
No, define contemporary.
Well, considering Tacitus wasn't born until after these events occurred, the best Tacitus could ever do is talk to people who either were eyewitnesses or claimed to have spoken to eyewitnesses.
So maybe this was passed down via like 2 generations via oral tradition, which did happen as like people took from, for instance, from teachers, and they could memorize entire texts such as the Iliad or the Odyssey.
Yeah, but you're aware that within a single generation, within my lifetime, Elvis died and people claim to see him in convenience stores.
Right. So contemporary accounts don't necessarily have to be first generation in order to be at least considered to be factually correct within a historical framework.
I don't even consider any personal testimony to be a fact.
What do you mean? What do you mean by personal testimony?
You observe something; it's counted as evidence in law, but it's not in science.
And the question isn't whether or not it should count as evidence, which I'm fine with anecdotal evidence. The question is whether or not it's sufficient evidence, and whether we can reasonably conclude that what you're claiming is accurate. And so, while there may have been a Jesus, and he may have been crucified, and he may have been buried, what we have are stories about this and not actual evidence to support the stories. And so when you cite, we don't, and I'll explain why in just 1 second. We don't have physical evidence for this. So I had a debate with somebody who said...
Evidence? You mean scientific evidence, like tangible evidence?
Yeah, the evidence that I give a damn about. That's what we don't have.
that's not necessarily the only kinds of evidence. There's philosophical evidence. There's historical evidence.
I understand that, but as I mentioned a minute ago, what matters is whether or not it's sufficient. And so if you're going to be arguing for a single occurrence, supernatural event that violates our understanding of how the universe works, you have to come better than something that was an oral tradition that was passed on and written down and reported by others decades after the fact.
So you've just okay. So let's back off for a second. Why do you think supernatural events are impossible?
I did not say that supernatural events are impossible. No, stop. I did not say that. I said if. Well, first of all, I have no evidence for any claim of supernatural causation. I have no evidence that it's ever been accurate. So that's why I would reach the conclusion that it's improbable. But the point that I made had nothing to do with how probable it is. It has to do with what sort of evidence would be required to be reasonably convinced that a supernatural event occurred.
Historical evidence.
You can't demonstrate the supernatural historically.
Okay, we can. I don't understand what you mean by supernatural. This can be discussed in a philosophical context. Like, is the supernatural possible? And I don't see the reason for why it is not.
Sure, it's possible.
Well, that's a shifting of the burden of proof. It's not up to people to demonstrate that the supernatural isn't possible. It's up to people who are claiming supernatural to demonstrate that it is possible, and then to go the extra step to show that it is the most probable explanation for the fact they're trying to explain.
Again, I've shown this historically through the empty tomb.
No, an empty tomb is not a proof of the supernatural. An empty tomb is confirmation of an empty tomb is confirmation of an empty tomb. So if I make a prediction and it comes true, that's independent of how I was able to make a prediction that came true. Just as an empty tomb, if in fact this is accurate, is independent of the explanation for why the tomb was empty.
Okay, but you need to come up with an explanation.
No, you don't. No, you can't. No, you can't. No, you can't. Here's why. We don't have to. We don't. I'm going to hang up.
Please finish.
I'm going to hang up. You're saying that we have to come up with an alternate explanation. That is also shifting the burden of proof. Even if I have no alternate explanation, that does not mean that supernatural causation wins by default. That's a fallacy.
How is that a fallacy? No, it's not a fallacy because
here's why.
I'll stop now.
Look, here's why it is. Let's say we find a tomb and it's empty, okay? And you assert that the reason that it's empty is because there was some supernatural event. And I say, I don't believe that. The burden of proof is on you to substantiate why you hold that extraordinary position, and extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. That's what we're looking for.
Right. So now may I finish without being interrupted?
If you pull some smug shit again, you won't.
It's not smug shit, I'm telling you.
Okay.
That is a fact. Okay. So I've come with the empty tomb, and the resurrection is so far the only theory that can account for this fact.
Why? Well, here's one.
The reason, okay, I'll tell you why.
Aliens came and took Jesus' body.
Here's another one. The Romans thought it would be funny to just go in there and take the body.
Here's another one. It's a story that didn't actually happen.
Okay, so all right, let's start with those theories. So let's start with the
Here's
first
another one. A herd of elephants just ran in there and took him away.
Hold on, you said let's start with the first one. Like, let's not go through and actually disprove these. Our point is not these are alternative explanations that we think are better than yours. The point is that there are more than one explanation, and just by saying that
okay, possibility is not probability. That's a fallacy. Possibility does not entail probability.
Okay.
None of us said that, and I don't think any of us disagree.
And it kind of does as well. If it's possible, then there's an essence of probability.
Non-zero probability, but yeah.
Yeah.
Right, but your argument has shown that.
What argument?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, interestingly, okay, can you just repeat? Because I don't think I've made one, but can you just repeat my argument?
Okay, so I think one of you said that Jesus's body was stolen, right?
Well, you said
no. I just gave you another possibility.
Right, that's one possibility. So the reason the reason that possibility doesn't work is because, one, it was Passover, and we cannot overlook that fact. And there were pilgrims everywhere, so they would have been seen and they would have been caught. And
these are just assumptions.
Not if they have a teleporter.
It's insane. There's all these assumptions you're making, and you're
yeah. It seems frivolous to be just saying, you know, aliens could have come down and abducted. But the point we're trying to make is that you can give any explanation you like. And just because it's not on you to disprove these things, like you're going to go through and try and disprove the idea that the body was stolen. Like, that's not what we're trying to do. That's not what we're trying to get you to do. We're trying to make you realize that it's not your job to prove why our theory is wrong. It's our job to prove why our theory is correct. So if I assert that the body was stolen, then I have to justify that claim.
Right. And let's say for the sake of argument, and then I'll let you go or let you talk, is all three of us are convinced that people didn't steal the body, and that aliens didn't steal the body. And so you don't have to disprove any of those. We already agree.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, again, so this is what I'm trying to say is that you're coming up with, those are possibilistic explanations, and I'm only going to argue against the probabilistic explanations. Like the arguments that you think better fit the data than the resurrection theory. That better account for the fact.
No, this is not what's happening. So all three of us will sit here and say, we have no explanation for the empty tomb claim.
Right.
Now, explain why you're convinced that a supernatural event is the best, most probable explanation.
Because it can account for the empty tomb. Because if Jesus did resurrect, then he would have left the tomb and appeared to the disciples.
So Matt's just asked you why you think this hypothesis is likely to be true, and you've just said that it's likely to be true simply because it can be true. It's not good enough.
I said Jesus left the tomb and appeared to his disciples. You have not provided a better explanation for
We don't need to.
We don't need to. That is the fallacy that I'm talking about. You can view it as either an argument from ignorance fallacy, that essentially you're right until you're proved wrong, or you can view it as an argument from personal incredulity, that you just don't find other explanations satisfying. The point here is not, hey, you're wrong. We're not saying you're wrong. We're saying that you can't present this haven't presented the sort of evidence that should convince someone that you're correct. Just because your explanation accounts for other claims, like Jesus appeared to disciples, there's another claim. The issue was explain the empty tomb. And your answer was that if Jesus was resurrected, that this would explain the empty tomb and these other claims. Well, I haven't even accepted that these other... Sorry?
Right. You see, the thing is, after I've claimed, and let me finish, please. The thing is, I've said that after I understood the resurrection as possibility, we need to find better explanations for this fact. So the conspiracy, for instance, that, hold on, let me finish, that the disciples stole the body, it does not...
We're not presenting that. It's irrelevant to the discussion. And you keep repeating this thing. You keep repeating this thing that you've established. You keep repeating that you've established that a resurrection is possible, and therefore the burden of proof is on somebody to show that there's a better explanation. Well,
correct. Once I've done that, this is not an argument from ignorance fallacy. If I just
no. First of all, you haven't demonstrated that a resurrection is even possible. You haven't demonstrated even the possibility of this. Oh my God!
To show that supernaturality is false.
See?
That it can't happen.
Now you're doing it again by saying that the supernatural is possible until somebody demonstrates it's not. That's not the way this works.
This is the shifting of the burden of proof.
Yeah.
You need to understand that we're not calling you, telling you that we think you're wrong. You're calling us, telling us that you think you're right. You're the one who's making the claim. It has to be on you. If I said to you, if I produced a Quranic miracle and said, here's my explanation, let's say Muhammad splitting the moon in two, and I say, the best explanation I have for that is that Muhammad was the final prophet of God. Do you have a better explanation? It's not your job to tell me a better explanation for Muhammad splitting the moon in two. It's my job to prove, firstly, that he did split the moon in two, and secondly, that the reason he was able to do so was because of some kind of divine connection that he had.
This ties exactly to what I was saying. Hang on. This ties exactly to what I was explaining before, but you weren't on the phone. So when Sir Arthur Conan Doyle watched Houdini escape from ropes and he comes out and the ropes are still bound, he concluded that the best explanation was that Houdini could dematerialize. Does that explanation stand as the most reasonable conclusion until somebody proves otherwise?
Look, the thing is, I'm not saying
That's a question.
I'm not saying this. Look. What I'm saying is
That's a question. It's a question, and it's not even hard. I'm trying. So if Conan Doyle says that the best explanation is that Houdini dematerialized, does that mean that is the best explanation? And is the burden of proof now on people to show that he didn't dematerialize?
No, but the thing is, you see,
that is directly analogous.
A separate fact. I've not just said the resurrection is possible. Therefore, there's a separate fact. It's the empty tomb, and I'm saying that the resurrection theory is the only theory.
The empty tomb.
The empty tomb is the ropes that Houdini left behind.